So, what happens when we have an emotional influx? What happens when our emotions begin overtaking us, where we start looping, where we start cycling, where we start really diving in to the mechanics of our emotions? What does it look like when we have these emotions come in and we are like, wow, this is a really hard thing? What do we do? Most of the time, we contract and we avoid. When we're contracting and avoiding inside of our emotions, what tends to happen is we listen to our emotions as if they have a rule over us instead of, wow, these are the emotions that I'm having, and this is the internal work that I need to do in order to develop the next becoming inside of myself. Hi, welcome into Internal Dominion. I am Michaela, the founder of the Red Diamond Association and the owner of the Unity Matrix system. So let's dive into Internal Dominion. The number one problem that I see when people are experiencing emotions is that we have associated our emotions with good emotions and bad emotions. And this is a natural thing to do. When we are children, when we have a temper tantrum, when we are feeling angry, when we're feeling grumpy, we tend to be demonized towards our parents, and our parents do not allow us to have those emotions. And when we are happy, when we're feeling good, when we're in a positive mood, we seem to be more accepted. We have more love, we have more engagement with people. And what that does is it shows us that in order to be able to do anything in our lives, that means that we must have to feel like it. That means that it must only make logical sense that our emotions are something that we should suppress, that we should not engage with our emotions, that in any time that our emotions are feeling a little too heavy, it's better to treat them with softness instead of strategy. It's better to treat our emotions as something that has power. And our emotions are powerful. But what we tend to do is rationalize our emotions towards the things that have kept us in cycles and loops forever, instead of utilizing them as a code, utilizing them as a mathematical equation, not to rationalize, but how can we utilize our emotions for our self-betterment? With our emotions, the best thing that we can do is utilize them as an observatory center. So we need to start decoding these like a really cool, what is that cartoon where the little guy has a rat and he has the big glasses and he's in the observatory? I don't remember what it's called, but we need to treat our emotions as an observation lab, as if our emotions are something that we experience, that we're noticing, and then we can kind of decode them. So the way that I like to demonstrate this is rising above our emotions. This is not meaning I'm going to shove my emotions down and I'm going to perform over my emotions and I'm going to disregard my emotions. What it means is you become the being that has regulation over the top of your emotions. So you are not forcing your emotions. A lot of people think that emotional regulation is forcing yourself to behave completely in conjunction with your emotions, and you are now the doer and the sayer of, oh, I'm not going to feel this thing, I'm not going to do this thing, I'm going to deny this emotion. So we see that a lot. I'm going to deny the way that I feel about this. What we are actually going to do is we are going to lead on top, and we are going to look at our emotions like a little observation chamber. So it kind of looks like this: extreme anxiety towards a situation. Oh, hey, anxiety, I see you. What are you telling me in this moment? Are you telling me not to go to this thing, or are you telling me that maybe the environment isn't safe? Is there something inside of this that is triggering me? Now, this is a very different mechanic than utilizing them to rationalize our behavior, okay? Most oftentimes what we do is we take our emotions and we rationalize why something isn't good enough, why we shouldn't do something, why we should continue the types of behaviors or the actions or the lifestyle that we always have. So what we're wanting to achieve is not being the self that reacts, but the self that governs. I had a conversation quite a while ago with a woman, and she was preparing to potentially leave a relationship. And I asked her, why does she feel like she's stuck? Why does she feel like she can't leave? Why does she feel like she can't remove herself from that situation? And she goes, it's my emotions. I keep cycling inside of my emotions and I keep listening to how I feel instead of doing something about it. And I asked her in that moment, I was like, do you think that potentially you're not leaning into your emotions? Do you feel like you're rationalizing or making a logical interpretation for why your emotions are keeping you there? And she goes, well, I think I'm going to have to think about that because that's a lot. And in that moment, I said, okay, but let's break this down for a second. You are not utilizing your emotions. You are not utilizing how you actually feel. Because what I heard when she told me how she was feeling, she feels stuck. She feels like she's not doing well inside of that relationship. She doesn't have support. She feels like she's lonely. She feels like she's not being heard or taken care of. So her emotions are saying, yo, I need you to get me out of this situation. This is the grounding point of where we utilize logic to validate our emotions, not say, well, my emotions are keeping me stuck, because that's not true, because she was feeling stuck inside of her relationship. So now she's blaming the negative emotions that she's having inside of her relationship and then saying, well, I have all of these reasons to stay. This person has been in my life for a while. We're comfortable. If it doesn't stay, like my life is still, I don't have to restart. But the root of everything is unhappiness and rationalizing why it's okay to stay unhappy. So what is beneath all of the unhappiness inside of that? Beneath all of that is you don't feel like you're worthy enough for more. You don't think that you deserve a better life. And you are afraid that if you did take that leap, that you would end up in the exact same circumstance again. Because nobody takes a leap to change their life because they're excited about a change. They're afraid that they're going to just end up right back in that same situation with someone else. So the root of all of this is we have to learn how to redirect our behaviors. We need to learn how to change the feedback loops in our life and utilize the feedback loops that we have to direct our mission forward. So like this example with this woman, if she was actually listening to her emotions, saying, I'm stuck, this isn't making me happy, he does not treat me well, this is abusive, I'm being monitored, all of this stuff, she automatically would have came to the conclusion of, wow, my emotions, my instincts are horrible, I'm feeling confined, I'm feeling all of these ways. How can I listen to my emotions to make a better decision? How can I listen to my emotions to pave a way forward? But what we are taught is that when we feel something negative, we need to perform a positive on top of it. So this is what keeps us stuck in that loop of we have to perform happiness. We have to perform outside associations. We have to perform to make our kids think like everything's okay. Instead of saying, by us being in this relationship, I'm feeling all of these horrible things. I can't imagine what my kids are noticing. I can't imagine keeping my kids inside of an environment like this where this is their example of love. Because what I could do instead is show them the examples of love that I have within myself and pour deeper into them because I am not tired from this relationship. So what we see is we are validating the feedback loops of the experiences that we're having. We are validating, well, I have all of these things, why should I leave? And then you're saying, well, as soon as I leave, I will probably just put myself back in that situation because that's what I'm used to. And that's true. So it is your responsibility to continue to lean into your emotions and utilize them as a guide to push yourself and navigate yourself forward. So what's happening inside of this rationalization is that you are manipulating yourself by saying that your emotions are keeping you stuck, are keeping where you are. Because you are not listening to your emotions. You are listening to the feedback loops that keep your patterns and keep your environment the same. So you are where you are because you are rationalizing your emotions instead of utilizing logic to serve the way that you're feeling. So when you try to find the logical explanation, look, I'm feeling this way inside of this situation because I'm not supposed to be here. And this is just an example. We will have to dive into each emotion to really figure this out. But this is the example, and you can begin to apply this to your life. So this is not the role of emotions. It is, why should you stay where you are? Because you're trying to make sense out of it. So the role of emotions are basically signals for feedback to determine if our reality is benefiting us or if it's even reality. So is this benefiting us? And is what I'm repeating on my feedback loop even a part of reality? This is a hard thing for a lot of people to grasp into, because if it's like, is this reality benefiting me? And is what I'm thinking reality? Because a lot of times we think our emotions in circles and it keeps us in these feedback loops. It keeps us in these relationships. It keeps us in these roles. It keeps us in these ideas. Let's give myself as an example. I stayed in the beauty industry for 10 years, hating it. But I rationalized, I have this skill set. I did all of this work. I'm really good at this job. I love talking to people. So I kept myself there knowing that it wasn't actually fueling my bigger purpose. So I kept myself in that feedback loop. For example, knowing that my emotions were contracting every single time I walked into those rooms. So let's go ahead and trigger you for a second. You are not listening to your emotions. You are rationalize them. You are not where you are because of your emotions. You are where you are because you repeat the looped behavior patterns and use your emotions to justify them. Your emotions are not the problem. Your interpretation of them is. You are not overwhelmed. You are over-identified. So let's pause. Let's dive into the over-identification of our emotions. When we feel something towards something, we then grow an attachment and an identification to it. So our emotions are our identity. You know those stickers that we see? Overly anxious. I'm caffeinated and anxious. People love that. I'm so depressed. And we get stickers that say that stuff. What is that bottle of water that we have now? Unwell. Oh my God, I'm so unwell. And we keep planting these subliminal messages all around us. I need to have something outside of me take me away from here. We're constantly looking for Prince Charming. So we create these little associations, I'm overly anxious, hyper anxious, I have BPD, let's put it on a sticker. And make it a part of our entire identity instead of leaning into it and listening to what is it our systems are telling us. So this is us justifying and interpreting our emotions. And identity is the root here. Identity is a big root. Our jobs are part of our identity. This is a part of me. I can't leave. The gym, our hierarchical status, the type of car we drive, the things that we like. You must be this. You must be this. And what it does is it places a stamp over our identity instead of realizing that we are whole beings with or without it. So this is the thing. Our identities, the things that we identify to, our mental health issues, the things that we do as hobbies, the jobs that we have, the circle of being that we're around, the amount of money, the lack of money, whatever that is, what ends up doing is we stamp all of this stuff as our identity, and it reinforces the negative feedback loops. We see this the worst, the absolute worst within NA, SA. It's S, yeah, yes. What else? What is the other ones? I think those are it. But we see it a lot inside of those addiction communities where they identify themselves inside of sobriety. Well, I'm sober today, or I'm an addict. And what ends up happening, I don't know very many people that have utilized those programs, and as great as they are as far as the steps and being able to learn the fundamentals, because people identify themselves as an addict, it is incredibly hard for them to erase that feedback loop because they have made it a part of their identity. And we wonder why they can't quit. Not only that, but we are continually showing the risk and the reward system. The longer that you get with inside of the reward of sobriety, the less impactful it is, right? It's just another day. So we like to continue those attention feedback dynamic groups where we have a sense of belonging inside of the thing that we are identified as. And that produces a false sense of belonging, which produces false senses of emotional interpretation, and then it produces the need to hold on to that thing. Instead of realizing that regardless of what you are currently identified as, your belonging matters because of who you are as a person, not because of the associations. So let's lead into associations here. So we all have positive and negative associations. Positive and negative associations are as simple as heaven and hell. But what ends up happening is we latch on an experience to either positive or negative, instead of realizing that the story attached to the experience is what created the positive or negative understanding. So to really drill the loop here, what we need to kind of dig into is emotions are not good or bad. Our emotions are not moral or immoral. They are truth, and we identify inside of them. So what I want to kind of bring to the light and bring to the surface is our emotions are signals. They are feedback, they are direction, they are signals for alignment and correction. Okay, so imagine a moment that you get triggered. Someone says something and you get triggered inside of that. This is natural. We all experience it. None of us, no matter how neutral we become, are exempt. So somebody says something and we experience a trigger. So what do? Do we automatically react to them because they are a threat and a weapon to us? Or do we look at it and realize that maybe it's something inside of me? Do we throw a temper tantrum? Do we just go berserk because of this trigger? Do we identify it and understand that this is a part of normal life and realize that underneath all of it, it is your responsibility to be able to work through that? And then inside of those triggers, what is the piece for correction inside of yourself? And what conversations can you have with the people that are triggering you, if it is safe to do so, to begin that formation of a new feedback loop? So inside of this, it is one of the most imperative things to discontinue placing your emotions as moral or immoral. A lot of people believe that having a negative emotion associates them with bad, not being good enough, or maybe they need to hide or separate themselves. So the role of the emotions are to understand whether or not your current reality is benefiting you or harming you. That's it. And just because you have negative emotions associated with specific environments does not always mean that that area or that circumstance is not good for you. Sometimes, and most oftentimes, it is leaning into those negative emotions, those fears, those things that are like, oh my gosh, this is really scary for me, or wow, this is something that I need to do, but this is a hard thing for me today. It is leaning into that and doing it over and over and over and over again, because that is what builds your ability to expand. We tend to look at capacity or nervous system capacity as this thing that exists to show how good we are at performing a lack of emotion. And we have placed this emotional regulation bullshit onto new age apathy. And emotional regulation is not apathy. What it is neutrality and being able to observe your emotions from a higher realm, from a higher place, from a higher viewpoint. And what I mean by that is you are observing the signals and then determining what it is that you do with them. When we observe a hard signal that we do not like, what we end up doing is leaning the opposite direction and reiterating that pattern. And I always want to go into physics, the thing that says an object in motion motion stays in motion. An object without motion stays without motion. We often be the people that stay without motion. We often be the people that lean into the things that are easy because it feels comfortable. And then we waste 20, 30, 40, 50 years upset at ourselves because we didn't do the thing. But the reality is we chose to utilize those signals as reasons to go backwards instead of reasons to go forward. And that is when our decisions on, is this going to benefit me or is this going to harm me, comes into the long-term retrospect of what we do. There is no reason to utilize anxiety as an excuse to not do the thing that you were meant to do. There is no reason to utilize your emotional patterns as reasons to not show up. There is no reason to use your emotions as an excuse to not be in a room. The thing that keeps us tired, the thing that keeps us exhausted, the thing that really is shitty and sucky, and we hear this a lot from the neurodivergent group. Well, what if this is exactly how I process going and being alone by myself? Great. But I think that there's the deeper root of you feel like you have to perform not being neurodivergent in all of the rooms that you enter because you don't think that you'll be accepted. So in the deep part of you not feeling like you're going to be accepted, you perform emotional regulation. You perform being okay. You perform and mask and pretend to be everyone else. And that's why you're exhausted. What if that's the reality? What if the reality is, yes, you do need time alone to process, but what if you are not utilizing those emotions and the feelings that you have to put yourself in rooms that actually benefit you? Because people are a lot more accepting to weirdos than they are to the guy that wants to be a plain Jane. And really, it all goes back to the fundamental associations that we made when we were children. We were not allowed to be neurodivergent. We were not allowed to be weirdos. We weren't allowed to bend our ankles backwards for no apparent reason, so we lost that flexibility. But just because you lost that flexibility as a child doesn't mean that you can't grow it as an adult. If you weren't able to finish your ballerina program as a child, that doesn't mean that you can't re-enter that field as an adult. So instead of looking at your emotions and these negative associations of, well, I have to perform this thing to show up to my job today, what if you showed up without masking and you just communicated, hey, I know that my behavior is way different than most people that live in society, but I promise you the second that I can stop masking, my productivity goes up, my energy goes up. And honestly, we are moving into an age where leaders are required to understand and look at everybody in the room and put them in positions and in places where every single person can function in their optimal. That's where leadership is moving, because we realize that the old way of doing it isn't working. So stop looking at your neurodivergence as a problem and start looking at it as a gift, because people that are neurodivergent, that think differently than everyone else, these are the people that move rooms. These are the people that shape society. These are the people and their oddball selves. These are the people that have the most to give because they aren't like everyone else. So stop utilizing it as an excuse not to show up. Because on the other side of the anxiety of you dropping your mask is the beauty of people holding you and accepting you for exactly what you are. Okay? And even past that, the people that don't accept you and love you as you are and allow you into that room, it's because you're supposed to be on the stage in front of them. I'm just kidding, maybe not. It's because you are supposed to be in a different room. Not everyone's for everyone. And another way that I like to look at the humanoid species is we are all little molecular beings. We all have a positive and negative charge. And sometimes we have a positive and a negative in front of a negative, and those things clash, right? You can't put two ends of a battery together and expect it to work. So stop trying to perform for people that have the opposite end of the battery when there's not going to be a charge there. Go around people that accept that charge. So when you stop judging your emotions you stop collapsing into them. And when you stop collapsing into them, you can finally use them. So let's go back to the neurodivergent example. You do not have to mask. That is a decision that you are using because of your negative associations. So because that association of you are not good enough as you, as that weirdo that you truly are, we all have it. Some are better at hiding it than others. You get to begin destigmatizing your emotions and your way of behavior. And that is the first level of indoctrination, like undoing indoctrination, is you realizing that you have worth. And unfortunately, you are going to have to face the anxiety, that fear, that like, oh my God, what happens if everyone hates me because I'm myself? How dare they? How dare they not like you? Has anyone gotten to meet that version of you? You know what I mean? And chances are, the roles that you have inside of your jobs, the roles that you have within your families, the roles that you have within your friend group, they get so much more loud, they get so much more exciting, and you get to function as your full self. So instead of blaming the environments, start looking at, okay, well, on the other side of this exhaustion that I've been feeling, on the other side of this anxiety, by me just letting down my mask and allowing myself to show up exactly as I am, means that there's potential for acceptance, and I can actually do the things that I've been afraid of doing. I accidentally duplicated a slide. So, diving into this, emotions are not good or bad. Emotions are not right or wrong. They are a reflection of your worth rather than if you were good or bad. And they are simply data. They are not a reflection of your worth. Sorry. These are not a reflection of your worth. You are inherently worthy. You are inherently good enough. And they are also, the way that you treat your emotions are the reflection of the worth that you believe that you hold. That's where I was going with that. Because if you don't feel like you can show up into rooms exactly as you are, rather that is big and bold or small, spaced out and disassociated, if you don't feel like you can show up to all of those places exactly as you are, with no need to explain, that is a reflection of how worthy you feel. And that is the inner work of pouring into yourself and actually coming into what I call internal dominion, where you pour into yourself so deeply that it doesn't even matter anymore, because you understand how worthy you are at your core. So imagine the root of most mental health problems is the conditioning that we have had in our lives that tell us that our emotional responses are unhealthy and our behavior is bad. Your emotions are not a character flaw. Feeling something does not make you weak. It doesn't mean that you need to go beyond all of these prescriptions. It doesn't mean that you need to fix yourself. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It doesn't mean or provide evidence that something is wrong with you. Emotions are the feedbacks inside of our nervous system, really showcasing and asking us to listen to what our bodies need. We live in a society that is so focused on making emotions easier to swallow, making emotions easier to have, making emotions easier to deal with, instead of understanding that our emotions are signals from our bodies, from our nervous systems, from the energy systems within our bodies, telling us that we need something. So how often do you experience it being the worst and most difficult, horrible thing to do is wake up in the morning and you feel nothing but dread every day? Chances are you're in a freeze response. Chances are you need more rest. Chances are you aren't. Nothing is wrong with you. Nothing is wrong with you. Something that you've experienced, traumatic or overdoing it or otherwise, is asking you to pull back on your life. These are signals. And instead of listening to that signal and being like, yeah, I probably need to go back to bed and let myself sink here for like 2 weeks, we start naming it. Well, I'm going through a depression. I'm going through all of these issues. I'm going through all of these problems. And now I have to perform my way out of it. All right? Society tells us that if we feel like not going to bed, we need to get strict. If we feel like we're not doing well, we need to perform over the top of it. We need to get more structure. We need to start putting in more regimens. We need to start doing more to pretend like we're not doing well. We keep ourselves so busy that we never listen to a signal in our body. So when our bodies we wake up and we're like, I seriously can't get out of bed. I'm feeling dread right now. Like, I just can't do this. What ends up happening is we prevent ourselves from listening to that signal, and we continuously write over it. You know what that develops? Chronic fatigue, chronic exhaustion, overuse of caffeine. The hustle boys will tell you, yeah, just have some more coffee. It'll be fine. Just ride yourself over it. It'll be fine. And then your entire adrenal system is collapsing, and you end up being so sick that you have absolutely nothing that you could possibly do but take that time to rest. So instead of listening to that original cue that said, I am feeling dreadful and I really need to stay in bed, you ride over it with productivity and tell yourself that you're okay. Instead of immediately listening to that bodily response, leaning into it and saying, okay, this is the way that I can take care of myself today. I'm going to listen to this response, and I'm going to give myself to come back out of this. Because chances are, when you give your body that sense of safety, you won't have to deal with that as long. Same thing with depression, same thing with anxiety. Let yourself feel depressed. Let yourself feel anxiety. Allow yourself to move with your emotions and allow them to be a signal. You're anxious? Okay. Hey, anxiety, I'm going to sit with you and I'm going to find as much safety within myself and in my environment until we can figure out where you're coming from. I'm going to start just paying attention to emotional cues. I'm going to start paying attention to the behavior patterns of the people that are around me. I'm going to start looking for any toxicity within my job, within my workplace. And I'm going to see if maybe the people that I'm around, the relationship that I'm in, maybe my environment's not healthy. Maybe there's mold somewhere. All right, maybe I live in a moist environment and there's mold inside of my home. I'm going to start looking around and seeing like what is in my environment that could be triggering these things. Maybe there's a part of little you that's asking to be seen. So when we can lean into our anxiety and look at it as a cue, we then have the ability to say, oh, okay, my anxiety's here. I don't have to write over it. I don't have to demonize myself because I have anxiety. And I also don't need to say like, yep, I am chronically anxious. I'm gonna just I have anxiety disorders. And I'm sorry, but like a lot of the disorders inside of the DSM-5 are truly just cues on how we can start working with our lives in a different way. Not all of them. Some of these things are brain mechanics and things that are just totally out of my scope, but a lot of them are. And you know your situation better than I do. But I know that this shit works, and this is a fucking truth because not only the way that I live my life, but I see the improvements within my clients. And I have seen these improvements for the last 6 years. So when we stop demonizing and labeling our emotions and we look at them as a cue, okay, I'm feeling depressed. Depressed is a sign for needing rest. Maybe we can look at our environment. Did you recently let go of a job? Did you recently stop doing hobbies? Did you recently lose some friends? Did you recently go through a really deep, internal death where the things that you used to do just don't even correspond with you anymore? So you have to find new things that are in correlation with who you actually are now. Because oftentimes, depression is also associated with internal transition. So that internal transition looks like going from being depressed when in reality you went through phases of life that took you out of the things that you used to love or used to do. And the only thing that you have to do is reintegrate those things or do something else. But usually we like to say, well, I'm depressed, so I can't do things. Well, I'm depressed, so it makes sense that I would just rather watch TV. Well, I'm feeling anxious and sad and I'm stressed out all the time, so I'm going to drink. When we know, and it's scientifically proven, that drinking and doing these habits keeps our cortisol on loops until we break out of it. Every time we drink, every time we have nicotine, every time we smoke, every time we have a cigar, every time we do Marijuana, our bodies are waiting for that substance to come in again, whether you do it one time per week, once a month. Those systems are waiting for that opportunity. So we know this, and it's scientifically proven. So we go to that thing to numb us instead of break the pattern entirely and watch how over the next 3-4 months, we no longer have those same issues. Okay, so our emotions are not evidence that something is wrong with you. They are evidence that we have to stop treating emotions as moral verdicts and start treating them as signals. Because at this point, when we can treat our emotions as signals, we develop the ability to understand ourselves. And when we understand ourselves, we leave ourselves more room for compassion. We leave more room for acceptance. We leave more room for those things to be held for others. And we love the saying, treat other people the way you want to be treated. Or the one that cracks me up the most is, I treat other people better than I treat myself. I suddenly have this moral superiority. And the truth is neither of those statements, and where the fuck those even came from, I don't know. But here's the reality. We treat other people how we treat ourselves. So when you can learn how to read your own room, when you can learn how to understand yourself, when you can understand that the way that you treat your own emotions are the way that you treat other people's, and you start treating yourself with more compassion and acceptance and neutrality, you start treating other people's like that. Easy money. Easy money. So we have to do this work through neutrality and confrontation. Oh my God, I am non-confrontational. I have way too much anxiety. There is just no way. How about you start confronting yourself? I'm not telling you to go confront other people, but that anxiety starts creeping in. What's up, anxiety? What's good? What's good? What do you want to teach me today? What do you need? Because when you do that, you're like, oh, okay. Your anxiety's like, oh, she's not going to listen to me today. She's not going to let me override her today. Okay, maybe we can work together. Your anxiety becomes powerless because you're observing it, and then you're naming it, and you're realizing, all right, well, if you're not good or bad, and I'm not going to sit here and cycle with you today, okay? We're just going to pop on forward. Neutrality is the beginning practice of observing situations with objectivity. So when we can realize that there is no good and no bad, we have the ability to see and have oversight of them. And it puts us in the position of that observation chamber. And then when we confront those emotions, it is scary, but that's what is keeping you stuck. It's not the emotion. It's you not confronting the things that you have inside of you that are underneath all of them. The traumas, the pains, the grief, the sadness. We don't want to feel any of that. None of us do. Oh my God, no one wants to feel depression. No one wants to feel anxiety. No one wants to feel grief. God, no. Take that grief and throw it out the fucking window. Hell no. Grief is the worst one. But without grief, we have no opportunity to love. So do we choose love, or do we choose never grieving? Right? Do we choose staying somewhere where there is no love because we're afraid of receiving it? Because we're afraid of grief, right? So these are the types of loops that we catch ourselves in. But most of the time, people don't even get that far. They're like, grief? Hell nah. I'm going to go take a drink. Whenever we have depression, we're like, all right, well, I suddenly have this depression disorder, and I'm going to go talk to the psychiatrist guy, and I'm going to make my circumstances and my situations way worse than they actually are because I am imploding internally because I have not listened to myself in the last 20 years. I have overridden my emotions so hard and overridden my experiences so hard. I can't even. So now all of a sudden, when everything is like coming up and over to the surface, and usually this happens later in life, 30s, 40s, 50s, generally that's when that tipping point, that's where these midlife crises come from, because we haven't ever listened to ourselves. Not once have we listened to an emotional cue, right? So now it's like, okay, well, I have all of these negative emotions, and now it is time for me to do everything I can to avoid them. The root of a lot of addictions is avoidance of emotion. The root of domestic violence is the root of not listening to your emotions and keeping you stuck. And also, the mechanisms of having to be in an unhealthy loop to feel comfortable. A lot of us are programmed like that. I was for a very long time. You are not alone. So when we realize that our systems and our nervous systems have been programmed for survival, we tend to look at pain and suffering as a normal, instead of realizing that these things are not something that we deserve and removing ourselves from those circumstances. So you cannot govern what you refuse to confront. Okay? Addiction. Okay? Maybe you're power hungry at work. Maybe you have to have and play power dynamics with people. Maybe you gaslight them. And then gaslighting, is the root of that is avoiding. You do not want to take accountability. So it's easier to avoid and make other people confused, right? So avoidance keeps emotions loud, chaotic, and misinterpreted. Confrontation brings them to clarity. Because when you have the ability to name an emotion, name where it came from, unpack the trauma that's connected to it, and release it through your body, you're like, oh, okay. And the deeper that you go with your emotions, the harder route you take with your emotions. And we are in no way saying re-traumatize yourself to go in a hard way for emotions. Like, do not take it there. And a lot of people like to misinterpret that message. The deeper you allow yourself to sink into your emotions, your depression, your grief, your sadness, the anger, feeling those full force and expressing them in healthy ways, you then have the ability to go so much higher, so much brighter, so much more positive. Because when we are avoidant, that is the fastest way to stay governed by our emotions. When we confront our emotions, this is the way that allows us to be emotionally stable. And when we face that emotion directly, the shame and moralization of these things fall away. So we begin to see this as a signal, not a story. Because all of us have stories with emotions, sensations, and attributes associated. I like to call those qualities. That's an Ayurvedic principle. Is everything is associated with a positive and negative quality. And inside of those qualities is what builds those associations. So what we realize is things are not separated into good or bad. Our associations are. All events, all situations, and emotions are neutral until we interpret them through our perspective. So an experience can hold multiple truths at once. So when you build that internal dominion, what ends up happening is you are able to hold this truth and this opposing truth and not be split up by it. Your situations can be helpful and uncomfortable, painful and clarifying, so you begin to be able to hold paradox without having to challenge it. You come into a space of neutrality and acceptance, and by challenging yourself to be able to hold multiple viewpoints at once, you get growth product. You produce growth inside of yourself. A situation can be horrible, painful, distressing, and lead to beauty, joy, reverence, justice even. Okay, so when we can learn how to hold the paradox, we end the systems inside of us that hold emotional distortion. Because we don't have to experience things at a more intense or unjust level than they actually are. And all of this is rooted in judging yourself for the way that you are feeling. So everything is separated through qualities and opposite qualities. They describe how inputs affect the body, how our mind and our environments are without judging them. It helps us understand that everything comes in an opposite and helps us balance our experiences and other people without placing an absolute or a morality onto someone or a situation. So we see this in politics. If you are a leftist, you are inherently wrong and you're going to go to hell and you're going to do all this stuff. And if you are what are those people called? A Republican. What do we call them? Righties? We call them righties. They think that they're right all the time. Lefties think that they're right all the time. So when we look at the right hand, oh, you're so uneducated. You've never gone to school. You have a low IQ. we name all of these things. You guys are war producers, corrupt, blah, blah, blah. We say this shit about both sides back and forth. And the reality is it doesn't have anything to do with their morality. It has nothing to do with what they actually think and believe. You just have to go in alignment with what values you hold most. So what we really need to look at is there is no absolute or morality onto any person or a situation. Now, if you bring in trafficking, if you bring in domestic violence, if you bring in murder to this conversation and do not immediately apply it to yourself, this is a whole other conversation. This is you wanting to argue with the truth. This is you wanting to argue with deeper levels than you're willing to go into. And by you bringing in really hard conversations like that, when we're trying to work on your own internal narrative, you are deflecting your own internal inadequacies by naming something that is big and outside of you because you don't want to go there. All right? So when we are able to look at qualities and opposite qualities, they describe how inputs affect the body and how our environments are. And what that means is we understand these things without judgment. They just are what they are. This helps us understand that everything comes in an opposite, and this aids us to being more balanced, to holding more temperance inside of ourselves. These experiences allow us to reduce the moralities that we place on situations. And until we break down expressions and their qualities, we then neutralize them into emotional integration. So emotional integration is a waste of time until you understand qualities and their opposite qualities and the expressions that they hold. Okay, so expressions are the outward manifestations of your body's internal state, and expressions are understood as visible emotions and physical indicators of whether a person is in the state of balance or not. And most often, we see people that are in the state of balance as a mirror or a reflection to us and our own inadequacies. So then we place that on them instead of looking at ourselves, which is a whole other realm of teaching. So qualities are attributes used to describe all matter. Everything that we can see in the world is a description of a quality, okay? Understanding this allows us to be able to hold conflict or opposites without derailing. And this is a problem that we have in society right now, is every single time we have a conflict, we derail, our emotions bleed everywhere. We have no ability to hold stature or neutrality, okay? So let's dive into this. We have heavy and light. We have cold, we have hot. We have oily and dry. We have dull, sharp, soft, hard, smooth, rough, dense, liquid. When we can apply all of these to our experiences and how we are feeling, it erodes the power. When we feel depression, we feel heavy. When we feel happy, we feel light. And anytime we want to associate light is only light and dark is only dark, we have already created a war inside of ourselves that we will never win. So let's break it down into heavy for a moment. If a person is considered heavy, it is a bad connotation. If we go to the gym and we lift heavy weights, it is a good connotation. If someone is feeling a dull pain, it is bad. If someone is feeling a sharp pain, it is also bad. But if somebody is dull, as far as their emotional intellect, that is bad. But if somebody is sharp with their intellect, that is good, okay? If somebody is dense, that is bad, but if they can hold density, that is good. If somebody is smooth, that means they're quick, you know? But if somebody is trying to smooth talk you, that is bad. If someone is too soft, we associate that with weakness, or we associate it with them being feminine and nurturing. If somebody is feeling oily, that might mean that they're feeling sweaty. That none of these are inherently good or bad, and every single one of these attributes is associated with an emotion. And inside of each of these emotions is the way to integration. So let's dive into happy and hopeless. These would be opposites. Confident and fearful. Calm versus anxious. Forgiving versus resentful. Empowered, directionless. Proud, confused. So how can we intertwine all of these back into the qualities? Because not only is this naming somatic cues that we have within our nervous system, but these are also naming the attribute associated, which dissolves them within our energy systems. All right? There's deeper layers to this, but this is the route that we're taking today. So, for example, if we are feeling happy and sharp, maybe we could understand that as somebody is noticing their intellect, right? If somebody is feeling happy and smooth, maybe they're feeling a little fiery, they're wanting to go out and flirt a little. If somebody is feeling happy and heavy, maybe that sounds like they're grounded, they're not just flying around. So every single one of these attributes allows us to interpret emotions from a neutral state, because every single attribute, I call these attributes, but qualities, are associated with our emotions, right? So if we are fearful, but we're also feeling a little bit fluid, that allows us to utilize that fearfulness and lean into it a little bit. All right? If we're feeling directionless and light, maybe we need more density. Okay? So this allows us to see exactly how the world operates without naming it as good or bad. So now you understand the emotional spectrum, and you can identify what you feel and what sits on the other side of it. But internal dominion is not about labeling emotions, it's about utilizing them. So what we have to realize is everything that is data is neutral. So if we look at positive and negative scales, maybe you're trying to scale a business, maybe you're trying to grow in the gym, whatever that looks like. All of these numbers hold neutral charges. All right? They are neither positive or negative. They exist together. So identity is constructed when you treat emotions as identity, you collapse. So you collapsing into your identity also forces you to collapse into your emotions. When you treat emotions as data, you can then utilize them. So that goes back to the very beginning. That goes to the beginning when I was discussing the lady that I spoke to that felt stuck. What was the data there? Every part of her entire existence was saying, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to leave. That was the data that she needed to move into that instinct, move into that emotion, and then logicize what are the steps that I need to do to get there. So data asks, what is this telling me? What is shifting? What needs shifting? And what needs attention? Identity asks, what does this say about me? Am I good or bad? Am I failing or am I succeeding? Every emotion has two layers, the signal and the story. Inside of the signal is associated with the expressions and the qualities. I feel emotion and it makes me triggered. So feeling is the emotion and triggered is the quality. Weight, sharp, fast, jolting, right? What did the other person or event do inside of me to trigger this response? And here's a life hack. If someone triggers you, it is not their problem. You weren't ready for that. You were not ready to handle that. If someone triggers you, it is not their responsibility. It is yours to handle it. They don't have to be worried about your triggers. They don't have to be worried about how you feel. And guess what? The people that care, they would love to hear about it. But all of your triggers are rooted in you. All of them. They are rooted in you, motherfucker, and that sucks. That sucks. How dare they not monitor you? How dare they not notice every little emotional upheaval you have every time you have one? Are you asking people to live on eggshells around you, or do you want people to live in peace around you? Because if you want people to make your triggers their problem. That kind of sounds abusive to me. So what you have to do is you have to name, feel, notice, decide. That is it. Name, feel, notice, decide. And there are layers of somatic work that we can do together in a different place where we can excavate this from our entire bodies. Other people's triggers are not their responsibility. They're yours. So every emotion has the two layers, the signal and the story. The signal says something is off. The story says I'm not enough. The signal says this is unsafe. The story says I always ruin everything. The signal says this is aligned. The story says maybe I don't deserve it. All right? So when we look at the two layers, it is your responsibility to observe before you interpret. You interpret before you react. You respond instead of collapse. You choose instead of obey. So these patterns are how we shape and form mental links between events and memories and feelings, sometimes producing accurate and flexible interpretations, sometimes generating reactive or pressured ones, and sometimes reinforcing limiting beliefs or distorting our conclusions. Seeing that these patterns are natural tendencies rather than fixed traits makes it easier to understand how we can create more movement and more senses of actual reality instead of distorting. All right? We have a couple more things to go over here. So a balanced perspective develops when the mental patterns are seen as variations of one continuous process, allowing these experiences to unfold without splitting into opposite categories. This allows us to become more accepting of ourselves and others while reframing the ideas and the stories that we have created. You were stuck because you interpreted through judgment, through shame, through avoidance. And now you know how to read your signals, remove the distortion, and use them as data. You now have the very key front to governing your internal world. We didn't just cover emotional integration today. We covered boundaries. We covered feedback loops. We covered the entire basis of fundamentals that you learn after 6 years of therapy on repeat. This is stuff that you learn after undoing 10, 12, 20 years of indoctrination. All right? In this 40-minute, 50-minute masterclass today, you got a sped up, time collapsed version into the quantum realms of alchemy and emotional metabolism. I did this work so you don't have to do it as hard as it took for me, all right? This is your opportunity right now to move into internal dominion. This is the system that removes your emotional distortion, and this is only the beginning, all right? This is only the beginning. So go ahead and digest this information. Take this masterclass as many times as you possibly need it. And you know what? I was planning on doing this as a paid masterclass. And instead of doing this as a paid masterclass, I'm going to go ahead and give it to you all today for free. Because this is information that I think is not only valuable, but it is the root information of everything that we cover before we dive into the Unity Matrix. It is the foundational practice of what it looks like to do the work before the dissolution begins, before the integration begins. It allows us to have those perspective changes before we start working and rocking. All right? So if this is something that helped you today, book a discovery call with me. Reach out to me at Red Diamond Association, info@reddiamondassociation.com. Follow me on all of my social medias, because this is only the beginning of your development. This is only the beginning of your future. And in no way, shape, or form am I demonizing the role of therapist, not at all. In no way, shape, or form am I demonizing the role of a psychiatrist, not at all. But there's a really hard truth that lies next to and in conjunction with all of these people, and that is, if you actually want to do the deeper work, You will stop bypassing the work to make it easier, and you will go in. You know your situation better than anyone, and it is your responsibility to lean into that situation that you know. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here. I will see you inside of our discovery call. Reach out to me, we'll hook it up. Goodbye.